This is Haverford Friends meeting, the 21st of September, 1997.
So we ought to start giving credit to the people who got here on time. Or here at all after what we put them through this morning.
You can always attract at least a small crowd.
Yeah. Well, now, Mary Hoxie Jones is one of the very few people who was here as a grown-up when I was a kid here in the 30s. But she grew up here actually before World War I, a time that none of us can remember.
You're not supposed to say that about a woman, babe.
I beg your pardon.
I'm sorry.
All right, so Mary Hoxie Jones, the daughter of Rufus Jones, has had a very interesting career of her own. She has done extensive traveling and writing. I've been very fond of the book she wrote about Dr. William Cadbury in China at the turn of a lancet. Because my parents were married under Dr. Cadbury's auspices in Canton, and I take some credit for being conceived there, though I admit that's problematical.
I didn't know that.
At any rate, let's hear from Mary, not from me. Very glad to have you with us today. Here,
I'm going to.
the right
If I can.
place.
Oh dear. That sunlight is rather.
Uh-oh, sunlight. I think we can shutter those.
Can you? Well, just that. Well, I'm sorry to do that.
No?
It's okay. We can still see.
If necessary, we can put a light up.
Well, that's
Let's do that.
cutting up your electricity.
After all the talk about electricity.
Yeah, I know it. I know.
You brought the light with you.
I think
Oh, beautifully said. Well, it's very difficult to know how to start on this, but I suddenly realized, sitting in meeting this morning, that this building is the one stable building in my life. I can't remember when I first came here to meeting, and I'm still coming. I'm still a member. But all the other places where I've been, I've had to leave. And so it's one reason why Haverford meeting is so very special, so very important to my life. I was born on the college campus, and for most of you it seems about 1,000 years ago, but it was 1904. I was born on College Lane and moved to College Circle when I was 3 or 4 months old. But I left that house to go to college and for travel and for summers in Maine. And I left it permanently in 1936 when I moved to another home of my own. But I never left here permanently. I don't know how much you want to know about this meeting, but it was started in 1833 when the college was founded, and the first year the meeting met over on the Catherwood farm across from where the trolley is now. And then in the following year, in 1834, land was given by a friend for the building of a meeting house, and this was the meeting house. It was not this large. It was part of the meeting room when it was built in 1834. Eventually, the gallery section was added, and even later, all this part of the building. As a child, I don't remember when I was first brought to meeting, but whenever it was probably a mistake for the rest of the congregation. The benches were not the way they are now. They were all the benches were facing the gallery. And the men sat on the far side, and the women on this side. And my mother and I occupied the bench nearest to the door for obvious reasons. My father was sitting in the facing seats in the gallery, men's gallery. Although
There was a men's gallery and a women's gallery.
yes, the nearer side was the women's, and the farther side was the men's. And but my father was never a member of this meeting. Many people find that hard to believe. My father was a member of the yearly meeting of Friends for New England, which eventually became part of the 5 years meeting. And in 1945, 100 years after the split of the two New England yearly meetings, it became New England Yearly Meeting. My father was always a member of that. When I was born in July of 1904, which for most of you seems practically back at the time of the Ark, Haverford meeting was a part of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting for the Western District, 12th Street, what most of us knew as 12th Street meeting. And this was an allowed meeting under the care of 12th Street meeting. So when I was born, I went into 12th Street meeting as a birthright member with my mother, who was a member of that meeting. But in December of 1904, Haverford meeting became an independent monthly meeting. So I was moved as an infant from 12th Street to this meeting as a member with my mother. We had birthright member. And in Philadelphia, the child went with the mother. In New England, the child went with the father. So, look what happened. I was in both of them. And I remained in New England until about 1950 or so, when I was on the committee for working on an organic union for the joining of the two Philadelphia yearly meetings, Ray Street, Hicksite, and Arch Street, Orthodox. Yeah, thanks. And I was going to continue my double membership, which I rather liked because I went to New England Yearly Meeting in the summer and was a member of the China Monthly Meeting of the Friends, where I went in the summer. And but we had a very eager beaver on the committee for Organic Union, and we were discussing whether you should have dual membership, whether you could be a member of both of two yearly meetings or a yearly meeting and a church. And this friend, who was a relation of mine, said, "Mary, thee should not be a member of two yearly meetings." Oh, I said, I like it. But thee should not be. So eventually I resigned from New England Yearly Meeting, very sadly.
I think that's terrible.
I thought it was too. However, I did. And, but in any case, I was coming to this meeting from a very early age. And as I say, sitting near the door where my mother could get me out very quickly, which was often the case. But as I say, my father was not a member of this meeting, but he was a recognized minister in his yearly meeting, and he was a minister here. He spoke very frequently, and he sat in the gallery. While I was still very young, when he rose to speak, I rose too, standing out here over the radiator, a register in the floor. And fortunately, I didn't try to speak. But my mother let me do this because I think it gave me a chance to move around and get out of her way. We had a very interesting collection of friends in those days. We still do, but these are the people in the men's gallery sitting there. Was John B. Garrett was sitting at the head of the meeting, a perfectly marvelous elderly friend whose grandchildren were Margaret and Francis Williams, great friends of mine. My father, Isaac Sharpless, president of Haverford, David Alsop, very often George Barton, who was a friend of my father's and a professor of Bible at Bryn Mawr College, and many others whom I should remember. I do remember, but I can't think of all their names. On the ladies' side, on the women's side, was Anna Ladd, whose father was the first, James E. Rhodes, the first president of Bryn Mawr College. Margaretta Alsop, later Mary Vaux, Sarah DeWeese, and some all very remarkable men and women who set a tone for this meeting that is hardly possible to repeat. As I say, we were all sitting facing the gallery, and for the first early years of my life, the women on one side in the body of the meeting and the men on the other. But soon that was given up. Families wanted to sit together, and so they changed that. And I can't remember what year it was that the benches were, the position of the benches was changed, but it was a concern of Ted Hetzel, professor at Haverford, and also Bill Cadbury, professor at Haverford. They felt it would be much more friendly to have a meeting where you could face one another. Well, if you look at those benches and realize what is involved in moving them, because they are tremendously long and tremendously heavy, so that it was a major decision to move those benches. And once I think they were moved back to the original position because someone was getting married and wanted to have it that way, but they had to pay for the moving.
Anybody remember when that happened? Was it the 1950s?
Well, it could have been, Sid. It could have.
I think it was.
I would think it might have been about then.
I think Chestnut Hill meeting met that way in the 40s, but that was considered quite a new idea then.
Well, Chestnut Hill was, of course, a very new meeting.
Yeah.
They started out on a more modern basis. But some people find this arrangement difficult for hearing, and I don't know. Of course, the hearing problem in all meetings is extremely a great problem, because whatever you try to do, nobody can hear. And I hope the new panels have been really helpful. I haven't heard too much about them, so this room, in this room, we had opening exercises for Sunday school, and then we had classes in these other rooms. We had no secretary of the meeting in those days, and I came regularly to Sunday school. We did not have the system of having children come in at the end of meeting or the early part of meeting. You went to Sunday school and then you went to meeting, so that a child had 2 hours of sitting, which was excessively difficult for many of us. But on the other hand, I think the Sunday school was a very good plan. I should mention the person who for me was the most dramatic of all the people that came here to Haverford meeting. And that was the president of Bryn Mawr College, M. Carey Thomas.
What was his name?
M. Carey Thomas. Martha Carey Thomas.
Was she a friend?
She was. She was. She came from Baltimore, and she had been the first dean at Bryn Mawr, and eventually had become president in, I think it was about 1898, she became president. And if any of you want to read about her, there's a fascinating biography. But she always came in late. And she came in the side door here. And she was lame because she had had a terrible burn when she was a child. And it had affected her leg. So she came in late, limping. And if ever I have seen a dramatic entrance to anything, it is that I learned as a young child to look for this figure limping in, coming in late, sitting in the next to the front seat facing the gallery. And as a result, also she, my father was president of the board of trustees at Bryn Mawr College at the time, and had a great deal to do with Miss Thomas. And I was well aware of her, the awesome effect she had on him and on everybody else. And I decided that Bryn Mawr College was not for me. So I didn't know when I refused to go to Bryn Mawr and enter in 1922 to college that she would retire that year. So I could have gone, but I'm very glad I went away to Mount Holyoke. Very glad. Well, we had some remarkable preaching in my youth. We occasionally had visitors from conservative yearly meetings. And I don't suppose that most of you have ever heard the Quaker sing-song.
I haven't. Didn't know we had one.
Well, Quaker ministers would start out fairly easily and normally, but then they would get carried away by their message. And I can understand now why churches have the kind of chanting that they do, because this was very much like a church canting. And we had a good many friends from Ohio meeting, North Carolina meeting, and some of the others that were a thrill for a child to listen to. I don't know whether I can imitate it sufficiently well for you to get the idea, but my father used to quote something that I don't think was ever preached, but it's easy to copy. We must guard against a great and growing evil. It is spreading out across our land. It is spreading out beyond the Allegheny Mountains. I mean, baseball.
I'm football and boxing and wrestling.
But friends would quote a verse from the Bible, and then they would get carried away and go on, and it was fascinating to listen to. And especially Ohio and North Carolina friends were good at this. And it was pretty hard not to laugh. So I had lessons in discipline. My father, as I say, was not a member of this meeting, but he was very much here in the meeting. And most people didn't understand that he wasn't a member. They couldn't believe it. And at one point, there was a good deal of discussion about enlarging the graveyard. And they needed to have more space, and somebody, my parents and I were in Europe at the time, and Susan DeWeese wrote a letter to us saying that about this problem of enlarging the graveyard, and that one of the real reasons for having to do it was there was no place for Rufus Jones. So we wrote back and said, not to worry, Father already had reserved a space for himself and his wife and his daughter, and that there was no need to enlarge it on our account. But they did anyway. They did enlarge it a little. And the graveyard is now becoming fairly well filled, and it is a question of whether it can be enlarged again. I started going to the Friends School next door in 1910, and the building that I went into is no longer standing. It was a 2-room, 1-story building that had been built in 1885 when the school was begun. And in I think it was 1913, this present building, which has been added on to at least twice since then, was erected. And the architect was William Bailey, a member of the meeting, and I entered into the 3rd or 4th grade in that new building. And we
Is he the
thought
father of Bert Bailey?
he was the uncle.
Is he a relative?
And the decision had been made to have the downstairs heated and closed windows, and the upstairs to be open air school, windows open and no heat. So the classes were divided into whether you had heat or not. And some parents wanted their children to have warm classrooms. And this was at the time when the Phoebeana Thorne School at Bryn Mawr was being considered and started. So I went to upstairs part of the school and wore a gray woolly bear suit with a cap and gloves and fleece-lined boots. And it was an incredible arrangement. Trying to write, you had to take your gloves off, and but it finally was abandoned about the time I left, I think. I can't remember whether we still had it when I finished the 6th grade. But as you see, I started my life right here, in this meeting, in that school, which was a wonderful school for a Quaker child. It was a Quaker school, and I could walk to school, I could ride my bicycle to school, and as I did. And I loved it. It was a terrible change to go to the Baldwin School at the end of when I entered the 7th grade. Well, what can one say about this meeting? It is so special, it is so precious, all the people that were part of it were so unique and wonderful. Most of them were wonderful. We had a few odd ones, as one would expect, but how much it must have grounded me in my whole life, it's hard to put into words. I found it very difficult to sit still. I didn't understand what was being said much of the time, although when my father spoke, I could. I did understand because he always had something for children to be able to follow and listen to. He used to preach in the summertime in Maine, and he had the children hanging on his words. But Isaac Sharpless always had a good message for friends, and George Barton, father's friend who taught at Bryn Mawr, was always very learned. I can't remember learning a great deal that meant anything to me from him. I didn't mention Albert Wilson. Albert Wilson was professor of astronomy at Haverford, and he always had a especially loving message that children could understand. He was the professor that invited the children to come to the observatory once or twice a year and look through the telescope, and made an immense impression on all of us who were able to do that. And I'll never forget today that the last Sunday that Margaret and Francis Williams and I were here before we entered college, and their grandfather, John Garrett, offered a special prayer for the children, the young people starting off on a whole new venture of life. Never forgotten what it meant to us. Margaret and Francis have long since died, and they were my earliest friends in the meeting. And it's in some period when the Comfort children, President Comfort's children and another family and I learned deaf and dumb language, and we would talk to each other during meetings. So you can see how deeply religious we were. But as we grew older and began to recognize the treasure that we had here. We've never forgotten it. And we come back when we can, I do, and feel so at home and so linked up with the past that it's lovely. Well, I don't know what more you want.
Could you say something about the next generation of people, the 20s and 30s? I'm thinking it was a different group.
Well, it was a very different group, and of course I wasn't in the early 20s. I was off at college, and then I was in Maine, and then I was abroad, and so. But it's always been a group. We've always had a nucleus of college students, some of whom I think probably found it difficult to understand the meeting. I remember one interesting episode in 1917, 18, 19, when, well, of course, we were involved in the war. It was a very hard time in the whole country and for everyone. But when the Haverford Graduate School was started in 1917 for Quaker students to receive an MA, Master of Arts, from Haverford. They had presumably graduated from Quaker colleges in the West and South, and they had a chance to, thanks to T. Worcester Brown, they had a chance to come here and have a year at Haverford. And I got to know a good many of them because they were living in the house on College Lane that we called the Graduate House. And the caretakers were Almy and Elihu Grant and their daughter Rachel, and I was back and forth visiting Rachel a great deal, and I got to know all of these students. Well, many of them came from pastoral meetings, and they had been used to having programmed services with hymns and a preacher. And of course they all came here to Haverford meeting. And they found it very strange and very different, and had a hard time adjusting to meetings based on silence. And I can remember talking, young as I was, talking with them and trying to assure them that this was a very good kind of Quakerism. And so that I think they began to appreciate a totally different kind of Quakerism. And as I had grown up in the summer with pastoral meetings, I knew pretty well the two types. Young as I was, I don't believe I interpreted very well, but at least I assured them that we were Quakers. And
could I ask you something about wintertime sports? I think I've heard that it was possible to go with your sled and go down past the cricket club and then down the hill.
Past the cricket.
No.
Okay.
No, the sledding hill was over on the way to the Conklin Gate.
Yeah.
And
Sure, the little one here.
Yeah.
well, the slide that my father took, and thank heaven it didn't kill him, was out. Oh dear, what's the road that goes down by the cricket club?
Gray's Lane?
Gray's Lane. Is that the one you mean?
That was the one I mean.
Oh, well, not in my youth, I can assure you. It was in my father's college days that they did that on a bobsled. Well, there weren't any flexible flyers in those days.
Well, there was a private that lived on Gray's Lane alongside that hill. And I, as a child, knew that family, and a lot of us went down there, but of course the sledding field at the college, the boys used to go out and smack it down, and we could sled all the way from that path down by the skating pond and across the lane. It was so steep.
And what's there skating on the pond?
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
lived down
I
there.
grew up on it.
Fell into the pond many times.
I could look out from the bathroom window in our house, 2 College Circle, and see whether there were people skating. So then I would know to go down and take my skates. And the skating house was manned by Harry Carter,
Oh, yeah.
a long, much beloved member
With
of
a
the...
big stove that you could dry your wet feet.
Yes, and get warm.
I'd rather have a fireplace.
Well, not in that building.
There was a big pot-bellied stove right in the middle of the room.
I've never seen it.
But you see, Harry Carter had to stand at the door and take in 25 cents or whatever it was. The hoi polloi had to pay. I could go free because I was a college lassie. And, but they had to pay, and so he stood out there collecting fees. But that was a marvelous, I learned to skate there, and I loved it. And I fell there one time. I caught my toe in a crack and threw myself down, broke all my ribs. And the wonderful sight was Mrs. William Comfort, who was a beautiful skater, and she could waltz. Oh, she could waltz, and some of us would waltz around with her.
Would her husband waltz with her?
No, he did not. I never saw him on the pond.
Was he a Quaker?
Oh, indeed. Yes, indeed he was, from way back. She was not, I think. She became one. But the Comfort family, the Batty family, Rachel Grant, well, they didn't have any children. We all would be down at the pond. The Bakers,
Yeah.
and your family.
William Comfort was the great-great-grandfather of the Willie children. I mean,
Yes,
that's
now-
many generations in front of us.
What was that girl's name?
Pat Roach,
Yeah, but her daughter. Isn't that the
Barbara
daughter
Willie.
that's Willie?
Barbara Willie.
Barbara, yes, of
She was
course.
here this morning.
They're
Oh,
coming
she
back
was?
to the meeting.
Well, that's what I was so fascinated to hear, that Willie, because I knew it was Pat's daughter, but I couldn't think of her first name. And
They've been here for the last 2 Sundays now.
did they join another meeting or not?
They didn't change their membership, but they chose to attend Radnor for a while.
Yes, that's what I understood. Well, is Pat still a member? Or
Pat Bauer's still members, yeah.
I think maybe we can draw them back to see through this.
what has brought her back?
She went to school with Martha Sharpless, who's very active in the Sunday school. And the chief person that Barbara didn't get along with is no longer active. So
Oh, well, that makes a difference.
However, she was head of the school parents group here a few years ago and headed up the fair.
Now, Henry Joel Cadbury was somewhat younger, and the Cadbury children came along after you left, I guess.
Oh, no. Henry Cadbury was my mother's youngest brother, and he was here at Haverford as a professor. But in 1918, unfortunately, he wrote a letter to the Public Ledger denouncing the hatred of the Germans. And this caused a tremendous furor among a good many of the college alumni who weren't Quakers. And so much pressure was put on Uncle Henry that he finally resigned from the college. He was not actually fired, as some people thought, but he was under such pressure that he did resign. But he came to teach in 1916 and they lived in number 3 College Circle next door to us. And he and his wife, and their first daughter was born in June of 1917. She's just had her 80th birthday and lives at Crosslands. And he came back to live in Haverford later, but he was then professor at Bryn Mawr College. So he was only actually teaching at Haverford a very short time.
Then he went off to Harvard, and we were among the people who rented from him.
Yes, he bought a house. He came back as a professor at Bryn Mawr in 1936, I think it was, when his youngest daughter was born. And they bought a house on Millbrook Lane, and he rented it to various people after he left teaching at Bryn Mawr and went to Harvard. He kept the house until he retired and came back to live in 1954.
Yeah, he rented the Hartshorn house for a while when they first came back in the 50s.
It did?
Yeah.
And he
Maybe
died.
it was just they let it to him or something, but he lived in the old Hartshorn house.
Then he died when he fell down the stairs taking breakfast with his wife.
That's right, 1974.
And Jack Montgomery took the house, which Patty recently sold, and became the Conrad.
Yes.
And Henry Cadbury gave a talk when he was 90 on the campus, reminiscing about all this, a very amusing talk. He said when the Board of Managers, in effect, booted him out, there being no such thing as academic tenure in those days, they gave him what amounted to a year's leave of absence severance pay, and he used it to complete the small book about St. Paul. And if you look in the preface of that book, you'll find that he acknowledges with gratitude the help of the Board of Managers for enabling him to finish the book.
Mary,
Yes.
do you remember Isaac Sharpless at all?
Oh, yes. I do indeed. He was a perfectly wonderful person. Very, very dignified, but full of humor, actually. And he meant an enormous amount to my father. He was dean when my father was a student here at Haverford, and he became president about the year after father left as a student. And he was president from about 1887 until 1917, when Uncle Billy came.
Now, Uncle Billy was the clerk of this meeting for, I gather, decades.
Well, he was for ages and ages. And my friend Francis Ferris was assistant clerk, sitting up next to him, and the two of them got into all sorts of giggles and so on, had a wonderful time. And one episode when there was a request for admittance to membership for a family with 2 small children, and there seemed to be a problem about how old were the children, and nobody seemed to know exactly how old the children were. But finally Maisie Paxson came up and said, "Oh, I think they're twins." And Uncle Billy said, "Oh, that's a real help." We had some, and I've attended a good many weddings and funerals in this meeting room, and I was a bridesmaid at the age of 10 for Patty Bush's mother and father.
Patty Gummer.
Patty Gummer. And then I was a bridesmaid in 1926 for Tina and Dick Jenny. And I've been at a great many other weddings in this building, and a great many sad occasions of funerals. And It's-
I think I recall Bill Meyer being sort of an official usher.
He was.
Imagine having an usher.
Well, we always did. We always had ushers.
Mary, you're aware that we have two of your father's chairs, which Miriam has given, loaned to the meeting, and then subsequently Norma has given to, which we use at the wedding services.
Haverford chairs, are they?
Well, they're actually belong to yours, the ones that Miriam took with her to Norma Brown's house.
Well, I know, but I think they were they Haverford College chairs?
I don't know about that. There was a sizable number of them, and we were loaned two of them and now have them.
Mm-hmm.
Could you pause just a second, please?